Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we're going to be talking today about 5 bills that are kicking around in Olympia that you need to be aware of. But before we get too far down the road, I want to thank a longtime viewer of ours, Chess Lover, because he was kind enough to keep all of us apprised of some things that were kicking around in Olympia just last week while I was out of state for a few days. So I want to give a big, huge shout out to him for helping us out and stay apprised of this thing. Listen, there's some pretty scary stuff that's coming out of Olympia this year, and we're going to discuss 5 bills. So it's time we have a pretty frank and candid discussion about all the scary stuff coming out of Olympia in 2022. Okay, before we get rolling, you guys know the drill. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button down below. If you want to stay up to date on issues related to your Second Amendment rights, go ahead and click the subscribe button down below. Click the little bell logo if you want to be notified when we post new videos. And most importantly, let's keep the comments and discussions coming. That's how we're going to get our videos out to more lawful and responsible gun owners like yourself. And when it comes to these legislative issues, the more we discuss this, the more we share ideas, the more we share resources in our way to combat it, the more we can get out of our representative government. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about 5 specific bills. A couple of them are carryover from last year's legislative session. A few of them are new. And so we need to familiarize ourselves with each of these bills and what they propose to do to our legislation. We're going to be talking about Senate Bill 5217, that's a carryover from last year's legislative session. We're also going to be talking about substitute Senate Bill 5078. In addition to that, we're going to be talking about House Bill 1618, we're going to be talking about House Bill 1630, and we're also going to be talking about House Bill 1705. All right, well, let's get right into it. Now, I have all of the bills right here. I've had an opportunity to take a look at them, read them, take a look at some of the comments, and also track where they are legislatively. Let's start right off the gate with Senate Bill 5217. Now, Senate Bill 5217 is not new. This was kicking around last year in legislative session, and then we got caught up in a pandemic and everything kind of sputtered out there. But this bill still has legs. What is this bill? Well, this is an assault weapons ban. Now, I know some of you right away are going to roll in your eyes and you're going to start getting down in the comment sections because you always get mad when I call them assault rifles or assault weapons. Now, I get where you're all coming from. I know what AR stands for. But I use the same language that the legislature uses. And as we know, the legislature is not well versed in firearms. So if the language is incorrect, I apologize now, but this is the language that they're using. Now, basically, this is a bill that if passed, it would ban, and I'm just going to list a few things, any assault weapon. Now, what is an assault weapon? Well, it is AK-47 in all forms, AK-74 in all forms, AR-15, M16, or M4 in all forms, and that's just a short sampling of the 62 different types of firearms that this bill would ban if it becomes legislation. Now, this bill was first introduced in January of 2021, kind of sputtered out in committee, was reintroduced again January 10th of this year, had its first reading on the floor, and has already had a public hearing on in the Senate Law and Justice Committee. It is now back in Executive Committee. We will keep track of this, and for all the bills we're going to be talking about today, we will put the links so that you can track the bills down below in the description box. Now, I know what one of the questions is, but I own an AR. I own an assault weapon as defined by the statute. And what about me? Am I grandfathered in? The answer to that question is yes, you are. You are grandfathered in so long as you can establish that the firearm was purchased before the law went into enactment. The proposed enactment date, if this is passed into legislation, is September of 2022 of this year. Now, if there's also another provision in there that if the firearm is lawfully possessed at the current time and the lawful owner of that dies, and the firearm is lawfully handed down to an heir, so long as that heir can also establish that the firearm was previously owned in a lawful fashion, they could inherit that firearm. As a side note, for those of you who've been kicking around the idea of gun trust, I think the need for that could be going through the roof exponentially here in the near months, depending on how this legislation goes. So that is something you also need to be aware of. So once again, this is Senate Bill 5217, and essentially what this would do, if passed into law, is outlaw all assault weapons, as it's defined here. And what it would do that, how it would do that, is it would amend RCW 9.41.190. For those who have been watching the channel, we know that's where we list all our unlawful firearms, and it would add a tremendous category of pre-existing firearms immediately to that list. Okay, the next piece of legislation that we need to talk about is Substitute Senate Bill 5078. Now, this is yet another run at a high-capacity magazine ban. Now, this bill, which also comes is a kickover from last year's legislative session, has had a bit of a ping-pong history already. When it was originally proposed, it was a ban for any magazine exceeding more than 10 rounds. Now, we obviously could determine all sorts of problems with that. Then Representative Brad Clippert from over in Eastern Washington was kind enough and worked hard enough to get the amendment to 17 rounds. And when the legislation stalled out in last year's session, we were sitting at 17 rounds. Well, Senator Peterson has filed what's called a Stryker Amendment. What a Stryker Amendment does is, hey, basically after the enactment clause, take everything that's been kicked around, get rid of it, and let's replace it with this idea. And that idea is now a 12-round ban, or a limitation of up to 12 rounds. So under Substitute Senate Bill 5078, we are looking at a ban of any magazine which exceeds more than 12 rounds. Now, the question becomes, of course, wait a second, almost every firearm I have, including all my PMags, my 30-round PMags, are going to be in violation of this law? And the answer is yes, they are. Yes, it is. Are you going to be able to be grandfathered in? Yes, you are. But here's the goofy thing about this law, and I'm sorry if I can't keep a straight face during some of this, but unlike with the assault weapon ban that the legislature's kicking around, where we can go back and we can trace when exactly that firearm was purchased in all likelihood and who it was purchased by, so we can know whether it came into lawful possession pre or post the enactment of that law. Okay, even with lower receivers, as long as they're stamped, that is essentially receiving the firearm, so we can trace it through the lower receiver. But what about our high-capacity magazines? What about all the PMags that we've bought? What about the fact that the Glock 19, one of the most popular handguns on the planet, already carries 17 rounds, as do a lot of other extremely popular and effective handguns that people carry every day for personal protection? What about all of us? Well, the sponsors of this bill have said that, listen, if you can grandfather yourself in, but what you'll need to do, of course, is you'll need to take photographs of yourself with your high-capacity magazines and then be able to establish that the photographs were taken pre-enactment of the law. Am I recommending that we all go out and start taking glamour shots with our 30-round PMags and stuff like that? No, I'm not suggesting that. This is not legislation yet. But this is the kinds of ideas that are being kicked around in Olympia this year. Okay, so there's 3 new House bills that have come out of the House of Representatives that we need to be aware of. The first one is House Bill 1618. Now, this comes on the heels of some success last year. As you know, the only piece of gun legislation to actually make it through and get signed by the governor as an emergency, so it had an immediate enactment to it, was Senate Bill 5038, which was the open carry ban at permitted demonstrations and also on the West Capitol grounds. That did become actual legislation. Following up on that is House Bill 1618. Now, this bill, if enacted into legislation, would ban both open and concealed carry at all voting places and places in which ballots are being counted. Now, the last time I checked, I thought we did all of our voting here in Washington State through the mail, but apparently we need to protect the polling places wherever those may still be, and there may still be some in parts of Washington. I mean no disrespect there. I'm just not familiar. I reside in King County, and we've been voting by mail for a long time. It also would ban any possession of firearms at places in which ballots are being counted. Now, I was unaware of any voter intimidation involving firearms, any attempts to disrupt the counting of ballots in Washington state through the use of firearms, but certainly there are certain representatives on House Bill 1618 that believe this is necessary legislation. It has had its first reading on the floor. That is all it sits right now. But again, you need to closely track this legislation. Again, we'll put the links to track this legislation down below in the description box. Okay, along the lines of House Bill 1618 comes House Bill 1630. In fact, they have similar sponsors, some of the very same sponsors on these bills. Now, as we are aware, there has been this phenomena to occur in the country over the last few years, and it was primarily created by our kids being forced to do virtual school, because it gave parents around the country the opportunity to actually peek in and see how and what our children are being taught. And some parents took exception to the manner and the subject matters of which they were being taught. And they have expressed those concerns to school boards. Now, not all of them have been productive and constructive and positive conversations, and certainly there have been instances of people acting up. Now, we have no data to support that any of this has occurred in Washington state, and yet 1630, if passed, what it would do is it would amend RCW 9.41.280. What is 9.41.280? Well, that's the statute that limits or restricts firearms onto school grounds. And we know that statute. We'll put the link for the video that we've done specifically on that statute down below. This would then encapsulate any place in which the school district is holding business. So you cannot either open or conceal carry at any school district meeting, in their buildings, or any facilities that they might temporarily be using. That is House Bill 1630, and you need to carefully track that one as well. Okay, and then finally there is House Bill 1705, and this one is going to get your feathers in a little bit of ruffle. This would essentially ban, effective September 10th of this year, all untraceable firearms and all 80% lowers. And so what it would do is it would take the current untraceable firearms statute and move untraceable firearms into RCW 9.41.190, which, as we know from watching this channel, is where we list all of our unlawful to possess firearms. It would also do the same with 80% lowers. And is there a grandfather clause to this one? No, there isn't. Actually, the only way that you can grandfather a firearm in is to actually convert the firearm to a traceable firearm. Of course, that would require that you go to an FFL, and not just any FFL. You have to go to an FFL who is licensed in the manufacturing of firearms. Only they can place actual stamps on them. Your normal FFL retail operation, they can absolutely transfer guns, they can sell you guns, they can take guns in on loan or whatever thing like that. But they are not in the business of manufacturing firearms, and so they would not be able to assist you with that. The other concern you might have is how many of those FFLs who've already jumped through all sorts of ATF hoops want to start stamping otherwise untraceable firearms and thus subject themselves to ATF scrutiny. And you can understand from a business model standpoint how that might not be the best move for an FFL. Okay, so in short summary, Senate Bill 5217 is an AR ban. Substitute Senate Bill 5078 is a high-capacity magazine ban, now currently set at 12 rounds. We got House Bill 1618. This is a ban on open carry and concealed carry at any voting place or place where we're counting ballots. Similar to that, House Bill 1630. This would ban open or concealed carry at any place in which school district boards are actually conducting their business. And then House Bill 1705 is a ban on untraceable firearms and 80% lowers. What do we need to do? I've said this before, I will say it again. We need to contact our legislators immediately and let them know that you oppose this legislation. Do it in a productive and professional and direct manner. If you do not know who your legislator is, if you do not know who your state senator is, shame on you, but we are going to put a link down below so you can find out who they are. Listen, you may have more questions about this legislation or anything related to your Second Amendment rights, and if you do, don't ever hesitate to contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or of course you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now remember, part of being a lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching, and stay safe.